All right, Kevin. So we're going to be doing, this is like the following page in your packet. But before we do this, I just want to kind of explain what this is about. So I'm going to flip it actually to the page before it, which is blank. And I'm going to draw a little picture so you can understand what we're doing here. All right, so in genetics, we study and we talk about how characteristics are passed on. So how certain things, like for instance the color of an animal, how the information that codes for the color of the animal, how that's passed on to the next generation. All right, so we just talked about meiosis and we talked about sperm and egg, and so what we do in genetics is we use letters to help us represent certain characteristics. Like for instance, we might use the capital letter for tall, and we might use the lowercase t that represents something that's short. And the letters, I mean, I could have used any of the letters in the alphabet, but they're just there. They represent a characteristic that we're talking about. So in this case, we're talking about tall and short, something that's tall and short. It could be a plant that's tall, or it could be a rabbit that's tall versus a short one. But just so you know, we're using these letters. They just represent a characteristic or trait. All right? So these letters that we get, I want to show you here where we're getting these letters from. So a minute ago, we talked about meiosis. So we talked about an egg and a sperm, right? So because egg and sperm, because they're sex cells, they have half of the information of your chromosomes. So instead of 46, they have 23. So it's half of the information. Sperm has half of the information also. All right? So when we have 23 and 23 and fertilization takes place, arrow, arrow, till we get an egg or a fertilized egg, this restores the chromosome number back to 46. All right? But if we're talking about a characteristic such as tall and short, in this person's sex cell, let's say their sex cell had this letter that represented T, capital T for tall. And this guy over here, the sperm, had a sex cell with the lowercase letter in it. Okay? When fertilization takes place, we end up with a combination of two letters. They look like that. And we're going to get to the name of these two letters. I'm just going to write it underneath. The two letters are called a genotype. All right? So in a minute, we're going to go through some genotypes, but I just want you to know that we're going to be working with letters like this, and they come in pairs. Each letter, one of them came from the male, and the other one comes from the female. So when fertilization takes place, now they're two letters together. All right? When the letters are by themselves, like up here, we call them alleles. So an allele is a single letter. So we have an allele here, and we have an allele here. And then after fertilization, we don't have alleles anymore. We now have a genotype because the two letters are together. So I just wanted you to draw this picture just so you understood where these letters were coming from. They come from each parent. So now I'm going to flip it to the other side, and we've got this. So we use these letters to communicate with each other about how characteristics are passed on. It's just for communication. All right? So we have some words here. For instance, up here in the corner, I'm going to zoom in on this. I'm going to write the word genotype. Because these pairs of letters represent genotypes. All right? So let's look at this first pair. All right? We have, if I say a dominant allele, out of these two pairs, I'm asking you which one is the dominant allele. So out of those two, the dominant allele is the capital letter. The recessive allele is the lowercase letter. All right? So these two words, dominant and recessive, they have to do with, for instance, in our class, a dominant trait for eye color is brown, which means that most people in our class have brown eyes. A recessive trait in our class would be blue eyes, because there are less people in our class with blue eyes. So the dominant trait is brown eyes. The recessive trait is blue eyes. All right, so that's what this means when we say dominant and recessive. The allele is, I'm asking you for the single letter. Which of these two letters is dominant? The capital letter is dominant. Which of these two letters is recessive? The lowercase letter is recessive. So if we go down and do all these genotypes, the dominant allele for the second one is a capital D, and the recessive allele is the lowercase. The dominant allele for this pair is the capital P. The recessive allele is the lowercase letter. For the next pair, the dominant is the capital, the recessive is the lowercase. And then the next pair, capital, lowercase, capital, lowercase, capital, lowercase. So dominants are always capitalized. Recessives are always small letters. All right? I hope that makes sense. So then what we do, these are alleles. Remember, alleles are letters that are just single letters. All right? So we're going to move over here to this side, and we start talking about some special words that we use to communicate in this unit of genetics. So for instance, these are alleles. And if I want to write, here's our first word, heterozygous. These three words are examples of genotypes. There are three types of genotypes. There's heterozygous, which looks like this. If we use the letter D, heterozygous looks like that. Homozygous dominant, which looks like that. Homozygous recessive, which looks like that. So take a minute to look at those. Heterozygous, they're both different, because hetero means different, one big, one small. Homozygous dominant, the word homo means the same. Dominant means they're capital letters. Over here, homozygous recessive, the word homo means the same. Recessive means lowercase. So we look like that. All right, so then I'm just going to go through this and using these letters, do the three types of genotypes. All right, so for instance, for B's, the heterozygous form looks like that. The homozygous dominant form looks like that. And the homozygous recessive looks like that. And then F's, the heterozygous looks like this. And then the dominant looks like that. and the homozygous recessive, 2 lowercase. Using H's, heterozygous, uppercase, lowercase, homozygous dominant, 2 uppercase letters, homozygous recessive, 2 lowercase letters. Using the letter G, heterozygous is like that, homozygous dominant, 2 capitals, homozygous recessive, 2 lowercase, and then we can go on and do the rest. Like that. All right? So these are 3 examples of genotypes. And these are important because we use these words throughout the rest of this unit. They help us describe the types of characteristics. So if you move up in your paper, we've got these boxes. They are called Punnett squares. And all Punnett squares do is they tell us the likelihood of what the offspring would look like or what kind of genotype they would have. So like for instance, the 2 letters up here, this genotype, this would be like the male parent. And then over here, these 2 letters would represent the female genotype. These empty squares in the middle represent their offspring or their children or whatever kind of animal or plant we're talking about. And the way you do a Punnett square is very easy. You bring this capital letter down, and then this lowercase letter over. And then you go to the next box. This capital letter comes down. This lowercase letter comes over. And then capital letter comes down. Lowercase comes over. Capital letter down. Lowercase over. So we end up with something that looks like this. All right? So I'm going to do the second one. This capital letter here comes down. This capital letter comes over. This lowercase letter comes down. This capital letter comes over. And then I could do the rest. Down, over, bring this one down, bring this one over. Hey, some of the questions some students had was, does it matter if the little letter comes first before the uppercase? It doesn't matter. But I prefer that you write it with the capital letter first, just like this. All right? So give this a try. Do a few of them. And then some letters are bad. Like I can't tell if this is an uppercase or lower, or if this is a lowercase or uppercase. So I'm going to skip that one. But over here, this one's easy. L's. Down, over. Down, over. Down, over. Down, over. All right? This one should end up looking like this. That's an easy one because they're all the same. Let's skip this P's because they look too similar. The R's, this big R comes down. Little r comes over. Little r comes down. Little r comes over. Big R comes down. Little r comes over. Little r down. Little r over. And then the T's looks like this. And those are Punnett squares. Down below we have a couple questions. It says, when you write an allele, how many letters do you write? 1 or 2? And alleles have 1 letter. How many letters are in a genotype? The answer is 2 letters. And then here it says, which of the following are dominant alleles? Remember, dominants are capitals. So we've got that one, the Y, the K, the P, and the L. And then the next one says, circle the recessive alleles. Well, those are all the lowercase. So it should look like that. The last question here, it says, for the genotype, uppercase, lowercase b, which is the dominant allele? Well, the uppercase b is dominant, and the lowercase is recessive. All right, so now I'm going to flip it over to the back page. And it asks, which of the following are heterozygous genotypes? Heterozygous are the ones that are capital lowercase. So all of those are heterozygous. The next one is, which ones are homozygous recessive? Those are lowercase, the same lowercase. So we've got this one, and this one. And then the next one is, which ones are homozygous dominant? Those are the capitals. They're both the same, uppercase. So it looks like that. So this first question down here, we're going to start to put our words to use. So it says, using the letter D, cross a heterozygous individual. Heterozygous looks like this, with a homozygous dominant individual. Homozygous dominant looks like this. So then I just put that there. Put this one here. Complete the Punnett square. And that's it for that. The next one says to use the letter C, cross a heterozygous parent, that's big, small, with a homozygous recessive, lowercase, lowercase. So I put this guy right here. I put this guy right here. I do the Punnett square. And that's it. Hey, make sure when you do these that you tell the difference between an uppercase and lowercase letter. Here's 3 and 4. Using the letter R, cross a homozygous dominant, which looks like that, with a homozygous recessive parent, which looks like that. Put this one here. Put this one here. Do the cross, big R down, little r over, big R down, little r over, big R all the way down, little r over, big R down, little r over. And we've got that. The next one is using the letter E, cross 2 heterozygous parents. Heterozygous looks like that, and there are 2 of them. One of them goes here, and the other one goes here. Do the cross. And we end up with that. And then for the last questions, it just says, what is this genotype? That is homozygous dominant. This next one is heterozygous. Two little r's is homozygous recessive. And then this genotype is homozygous dominant. So I just abbreviated. Homozygous dominant, heterozygous, homozygous recessive. That's just so you don't have to write it out. All right, so I think that's enough for that page, and I'll send you some notes we're going to take it one step further. All right, talk to you soon.